There are people who have spent so long operating at an altitude where ordinary rules become theoretical that they genuinely cannot locate the line anymore. Not because they are stupid. Often they are the opposite of stupid. They are people who built things, who solved problems that other people said were unsolvable, who moved fast enough and thought clearly enough and pushed hard enough that the world rearranged itself around them in ways that confirmed repeatedly and at scale that the usual constraints did not apply to them. They learned that lesson the way you learn any lesson that gets reinforced thousands of times over many years. They learned it completely. They learned it so completely that it stopped feeling like a lesson and started feeling like a fact, a law of nature, a feature of reality rather than a circumstance of success. Marcus Hale was 38 years old. He had founded a technology company at 24 in a one-bedroom apartment in San Francisco with a laptop and a specific idea about how supply chain logistics could be restructured using predictive modeling. By 28, the company had 140 employees, an evaluation that made the covers of magazines. By 32, he had taken it public in an IPO that generated the kind of coverage that used the word historic without irony. By 38, he was worth, depending on the day in the market, somewhere between $4 and $6 billion. And the range itself was so vast that most people would have needed to sit down and breathe carefully upon hearing either end of it. He was in Providence because his company had a partnership with a logistics hub in the port, and he visited quarterly. He did not stay in hotels. He had an arrangement with a property management company that maintained a residence for his use during these visits. He moved through the city with a small team, an assistant, a security consultant, and a person whose exact role was never entirely clear, but who was always present and always watching. He had received a citation 3 weeks earlier. His driver had double parked a vehicle outside a restaurant on a busy street during the lunch hour, blocking traffic for approximately 40 minutes while Hale and his team were inside. The citing officer had noted that when he approached the vehicle, the person in the driver's seat had told him that the vehicle belonged to Marcus Hale and had said the name with the expectation that it would produce a specific response. It had not produced that response. It had produced a citation. There was a second matter, a separate incident in which a member of his team had parked in a space designated for people with disabilities outside the logistics facility, again without appropriate credentials. That citation had also been issued and had also gone unanswered. Hale had not sent a representative. He had not sent a lawyer. He came himself, which surprised people who knew him and which those same people later understood was consistent with a man who believed his personal presence was his most powerful instrument. He had walked into rooms his entire life and changed them. He had sat across tables from people who thought they held all the leverage and had left those tables with everything he came for. He did not send proxies to important rooms. He went himself. He arrived exactly on time, which was itself a kind of statement from a man for whom time was managed by other people. He was not dressed the way wealthy people dressed when they wanted to signal wealth. He was dressed the way a certain category of extremely wealthy person dressed to signal that they were beyond signaling. Dark trousers, a plain shirt, shoes that were simple and cost more than most people's car payments. He had the particular physical ease of someone who slept well and ate well and exercised with the discipline of a person who applied systems thinking to every domain of their life, including their own body. He sat in the gallery without looking at his phone. He watched the proceedings with what appeared to be genuine interest. He observed Judge Caprio work through the morning docket with the focused attention of someone who was studying a system, mapping how it functioned, identifying the variables. When his name was called, he walked to the front with the smooth confidence of a man approaching a podium at a conference where he was the keynote speaker. He positioned himself before the bench and looked up at Judge Caprio with an expression of open, intelligent engagement. Judge Caprio greeted him. He asked how he was doing. Hale said he was very well. He said it was an interesting morning. He said he had enjoyed watching the judge work. He said he had a great deal of respect for what happened in rooms like this. Judge Caprio thanked him and said he would get to the matter at hand. He looked at the file. He went through the 2 citations, described them factually. and asked Hale to tell him his understanding of what had happened. Hale said his team managed his logistics and that he had not been directly involved in the parking decisions in question. He said he took responsibility for his team's actions because that was what leadership meant. He said it in the way that people say things they have said many times in many contexts, smoothly and with apparent conviction, but with the faint quality of a rehearsed answer rather than a felt one. Judge Caprio asked him about the disabled parking space specifically. He asked whether Hale was aware that his team had used that space. Hale said he had not been aware in the moment. He said he had been made aware afterward when the citation was received. Judge Caprio asked what had happened after he became aware. Hale said the situation had been noted and addressed internally. Judge Caprio asked what addressed internally meant in practical terms. Hale said the team member responsible had been spoken to. Judge Caprio said he asked whether Hale understood who those spaces existed for. Hale said, of course. He said people with disabilities who needed closer access to facilities. Judge Caprio asked whether any such person had been affected on the day in question, whether anyone had arrived at that facility needing that space and found it occupied by a vehicle belonging to his team. Hale said he didn't know. He said he had no information about that. Judge Caprio said that was the problem with that category of violation. He said you often didn't know. The person who circled the lot twice and couldn't find an accessible space and had to park further away and struggled to cover the distance and arrived late and exhausted and in pain, that person was invisible to the person who had taken the space. The harm was real, and the person who caused it never saw it. He said that invisibility was not the same as absence. Hale nodded. He said he understood that. He said it thoughtfully, with the quality of a man who processed information quickly and wanted to demonstrate that he had processed it. Judge Caprio moved through the double parking violation. He explained the impact: a busy street, lunch hour, traffic backed up behind the vehicle for the duration, drivers delayed, a delivery vehicle unable to reach its stop. He described it the way he always described things, specifically in terms of the actual people affected, not in terms of abstract inconvenience. Hale listened. And then he did something that the room did not expect, and that Hale himself probably did not fully anticipate doing, which was the nature of the kind of confidence that had never been seriously tested. He smiled. It was a small smile, controlled, the kind of smile that appeared when a person believed they were about to move the conversation to a more favorable terrain. He said he wanted to make a proposal. He said he was aware that municipal courts operated under significant resource constraints. He said he had spent the morning watching the proceedings and he had a few observations about efficiency and infrastructure that he thought could be genuinely useful. He said his company had done extensive work in process optimization for institutional environments. He said he would be happy to have his team conduct a full operational review of the court's administrative systems, pro bono, as a contribution to the city. He said the value of that kind of engagement, if he put a number on it, would be in the range of several $100,000. He said it the way you say something you expect to land well. It did not land well. Judge Caprio looked at him. He was still for a moment. The pen was down. The room was quiet in the specific way it got quiet when something significant had just been introduced into it. He said he wanted to make sure he understood the proposal. He said he wanted to walk through it carefully. He said that Marcus Hale, who was appearing before him as a respondent in 2 active citations, was offering to provide services of significant financial value to the court, and that this offer was being made during the adjudication of those citations. Hale said he wanted to be clear that the 2 things were not connected. He said it was a separate offer made in good faith. He said he genuinely believed it could benefit the institution. Judge Caprio said he was sure Hale believed that. He said he was also sure that Hale was intelligent enough to understand how it appeared. He said that appearing before a judge and offering that judge's institution something of significant financial value was not a neutral act. He said the sequence mattered. He said the context mattered. He said that good faith in the law was not determined by intention alone. It was determined by the reasonable appearance of things. And the reasonable appearance of what had just occurred was not one he was willing to let pass without addressing directly. Hale began to say something. Judge Caprio said he wasn't finished. The room absorbed that, the simple, clear, unhurried fact of it. He wasn't finished. In Marcus Hale's professional world, People did not tell him they weren't finished. Conversations moved at his pace. Rooms reorganized around his rhythm. That was simply how things had been for a very long time. Not in this room. Judge Caprio said he had a question. He said it was a genuine question and he wanted a genuine answer. He asked Marcus Hale when he had last been told no. Hale looked at him. Judge Caprio said not no in a negotiating sense. Not a no that was the beginning of a conversation about terms. A real no. A no that did not move. A no that was simply the end of something. Hale was quiet. It was a different quality of quiet than the quiet he had arrived with. The earlier quiet had been chosen. This one was something he had arrived at unexpectedly. Judge Caprio said he asked because it mattered. He said that a person who was never told no in a real and final sense eventually lost the capacity to understand what no meant for other people. He said the man who blocked traffic for 40 minutes outside a restaurant, the team member who parked in an accessible space, those decisions came from somewhere. They came from an environment where the ordinary friction that other people experienced had been systematically removed, where inconveniencing others was a background condition of doing business and not a thing that required particular thought. He said that environment was created at the top. He said the man at the top set the terms of the culture, whether he intended to or not. He said that Marcus Hale had built something remarkable. He said he meant that without irony. The scale of what the man had created, the genuine problem it solved, the real impact it had on how goods moved through the world, that was not nothing. That was something significant. But he said that significance did not purchase a different category of citizenship. He said it did not entitle a person to a process that moved at their preferred pace or responded to their preferred currency. He said that what he had just been offered, the operational review, the pro bono engagement, the several $100,000 of value, was a form of currency. He said it was a sophisticated form, more sophisticated than an envelope of cash, more sophisticated than an outright bribe, but it belonged to the same family of things. It was the application of financial weight to a legal proceeding. He said he rejected it. He said he rejected it completely, and he wanted that rejection to be clearly understood. He said this courtroom ran on one currency, the facts of a case and the law that applied to them. That was it. That was all. No other tender was accepted here. The silence in the room was total. And then Marcus Hale did something that no one present expected, something that became the part of the story that people return to most often when they describe that morning. He nodded. Not a quick social nod. A slow one. The kind that meant something was being processed at a level below performance. He said quietly that he understood. He said he heard what the judge was saying. He said he wasn't sure he had a complete answer to the question about when he had last been told no. He said that was probably worth thinking about. It was a small thing. But in that room, on that morning, from that man, it was not nothing. Judge Caprio looked at him for a moment. Then he said he appreciated that. He said it genuinely. He said that the willingness to hear something difficult and sit with it rather than immediately deflect it was rarer than it should be, particularly in people who had achieved what Hale had achieved, because achievement at that scale came packaged with so many mechanisms for avoiding discomfort. He fined him on both violations, the full amounts, applied cleanly and without addition or reduction. He explained each element. He was, as always, exact. He said one final thing before closing the case. He said that the next time Marcus Hale's team came to Providence, he hoped they would come as people who understood they were guests in a city that had its own rules and its own rhythms and its own residents who had the right to move through their streets without being blocked or displaced or inconvenienced because someone else's time had been deemed more valuable than their access. He said he hoped they would come that way, not because they feared another citation, but because they had decided that was the right way to move through the world. Hale paid the fines without intermediary. He walked out of the courtroom alone, having arrived with the team, and left, in the most meaningful sense, by himself. Just a man with his thoughts and a receipt, and a question he hadn't been able to answer. Outside, one of the regular court observers who spent his Tuesday mornings watching proceedings the way other people watch sports, sat on the steps with a coffee and watched Hale's vehicle pull away. He said to no one in particular that in 40 years of watching that courtroom, he had seen a lot of powerful people walk in thinking the room would bend. He said he had never once seen the room bend. He said that was the whole point. He said that was the thing.